Hi, this is Dana. On this channel, I speak about spiritual warfare, and in this video, God has guided me to speak about a specific topic, namely the spiritual work done through animal embodiment, the bondage breaking through animal embodiment. The title is Lucky Love, because Lucky is the name of my dog. And this is actually a project of mine, which I already started 2 years ago, but which will become more of a professional business, business-like project in form of a sanctuary for dogs. But this is valid for all animals, not just dogs. I want to specify this, right? And the basic idea of this concept is I learned actually after I returned from my spiritual journey. This is something that God taught me, namely that there are souls which unfortunately do not reach a high level of maturity, because the individuals who incarnate essentially go through specific bondages so heavy that they lose the soul very early on. Hence, of course, the emotional maturity of that person gets blocked at that specific age when they lost soul. You cannot have emotional maturity without a soul. Therefore, because they have these bondages, and here we're not discussing how they lost the soul or how bondages were created. Some of them might be guilty of the bondage creation, some of them might not be guilty. The focus of this topic is the fact that there are individuals who lose their soul very early on in life. For this reason, as the spirit and the body continues to live, it creates further bondages on that individual identity. And I explained in a different video, I think, but if not in a video, for sure in many prophetic writings, namely that an individual who carried the soul will become a spirit family to anyone who embodies that soul later on in any kind of incarnation. Now, the point is, God wants to work with that soul in order to gain maturity, to be able to carry on an incarnation, to carry on bondage breaking in human form. But for some of them, it's not possible to incarnate as human. Either that the bondage itself precludes that soul to incarnate, so it's created in such a way to make it impossible for a soul to come in human form. And this is the case of my dog Lucky. Lucky is a soul from my lineage who wanted to come and be next to me and help me throughout my ascension and throughout my spiritual fighting and bondage breaking. And they created a specific type of bondage in such a way so he won't be able to incarnate as human. So he won't be able to come with me to help me. Therefore, because he loves me so much, he chose and requested from the divine realm that he would be incarnated as an animal, as a pet, to come to be near me so he would help me. And indeed, he did help me a lot. I explained this in other situations. I learned tremendously from Lucky. I'm not even talking now about the healing that he does, because he's a pure soul as all animals. But I'm talking mostly about literally spiritual fighting. My first lessons of energy awareness came from Lucky, and through him I could understand the energy around me, through his reactions and so on. As at the time, although I did have my own energy awareness, but I was very busy all the time. And as I explained in another video, I was doing very often energy cleaning, particularly because I could feel the energy, the darkness around me and so on. But I never took time enough in such a way, so I would delve into analyzing what it means, where it comes from, how you interpret that, and so on. So it was Lucky who actually showed me initially this, and much more than that. He has helped me tremendously, and I would clearly wouldn't have been alive without him right now. But as I said, there are specific bondages created on souls, so they will not be able to incarnate as humans, specifically because they bring a huge contribution in ascension. And of course, the 3D matrix doesn't want them here on Earth, especially during ascension. So this is why God does animal embodiment for specific souls in specific situations. Others are simply, as I said, non-mature enough. They do incarnate as humans, but those humans lose the soul very early on because there are specific lessons which they don't learn. So then God does at some point animal embodiment with some souls in order for them to learn lessons, first of all, and second of all, by being on earth, they already elevate as souls because they do a spectacular service to the humankind, aiding ascension through their light, through their presence, because they are all pure souls. They transmute so much darkness that based on that, those souls already gain elevation in terms of spiritual ranking and so on. So this is the reason why. And of course, as I said, there's also the purpose of them learning some lessons. And I will give you an example. I have right now 9 dogs, my dogs, which I adopted, they're mine. And basically, at some point early on, as puppies even, 2 of them were in constant fight with each other. One of them, even when he was like 2 months old, he took leadership of the entire group, and he was constantly beating up another one, and he wouldn't let him eat. He would bully him all the time. He would, and I interfered a few times, and God told me, stopped me at some point, and he said, I sent you souls from lineage to help them learn lessons. I did not send to you pets. And they said, well, what do you want me to do? Because this one doesn't get to eat. So I interfere because I want him to eat as well. And that one doesn't let him. And God told me, don't interfere, just let them settle it, because this is why I sent him in an animal incarnation, because this one doesn't fight for himself. So that one is bullying him, but he's supposed to fight back. And I sent him, this is one of the lessons that he needs to learn, namely to stand up for himself and fight. And I said, so what do you want me to do now? So God said, just stand back, don't interfere, and let him learn to stand up and fight. Let him starve for a day until he learns that he needs to fight for his food. He needs to stand up. Don't allow the other one to take your food, and so on. It was very complicated. It is very complicated, but I learned a lot through this process, much more than in spiritual bondage breaking with humans. And I must say that I interfered more between the 2 of them, because a day would pass by and that one wouldn't eat. A second day would pass by and I was like, I cannot take this. You know what? Let's find a different way. I need to see him eating. So I would interfere, and I interfered a few times. I would also try to restrain myself. But there were times when I felt like I cannot let him stay longer than this without food. And so I would interfere and I would push the other one around so this one would get to it. But then, of course, he tended to be more attached to me. Unfortunately, he tended to be more courageous and confront the other one only when I was present next to them, you know. And then the other ones started beating him up. So God said, now this is your fault because you interfered. This one now is considered by the other ones spoiled by you. They all envy you. And now they take the hate upon him. And then God always has shown me this is the main psychological problem that you have with the same souls when they go into human embodiment. And this is why you have people hating on you because you have gifts or because you have a specific ranking and so on. You interfere because it's normal for you to make justice and to make sure that this one gets food as well. But the other ones were not seeing the injustice they were doing to this one. They were not seeing that what they were doing was unjust and that this one was starving and he needed to eat. You know, they only saw that you took, you defended him. And this is all they saw, although you defend the other ones as well if they are bullied. But they didn't see that you were just with all of them and that they are the ones who were at fault because they were the ones who didn't let him eat and so on. Anyway, the point is I learned my lesson, and indeed I saw that they were hating him more because I was defending him, you know. So I tried to restrain myself more. And indeed, after, I'm not going to go into details, after a while, he actually learned to stand up, right? And then God has guided me in many different ways to reorganize their life in my courtyard in such a way so they will learn specific lessons. For example, he had their specific type of darkness attacks sent to my courtyard and my house, of course. And God would guide me to move my dogs in different parts of my courtyard, depending on whatever type of attacks were sent. And God has shown me, for example, you let them there until they learn to deal with that darkness. Because I need them on DNA level, on soul level, to have this knowledge, how to withstand an attack. Because when they were human, this is how they turned karmics. This is how they betrayed their lineage when this type of attack and energy was sent to them. And I need you to keep them in that energy until they learn to withstand it. You know, I will say that in all of these lessons that they needed to learn, I of course followed guidance, but sometimes I would interfere. Like there were times when I felt like, you know, I just see that that one is not doing well, you know, so I can see him that he's not doing well with this. So I'm just gonna go take him, just wash him a little bit, take him to the shower a little bit, so he will recover, and keep him a little bit in my arms and so on, and then I will take him back. But mostly I followed guidance. There were just times when I didn't feel comfortable. It felt to me that it was too much. But then God would tell me, gradually, this one passed the test, now you can move him in another place. He doesn't need to stay in there anymore. Or at some point God said, you need to make them, force them to learn to get along with each other, because they were very selfish, you know. And basically he made me put them in a certain space, which was closed space. And God said they need to stay there until they learn to get along with each other, because these were enemies in life, in normal lifetime, you know. And there are so many examples I cannot remember all of them now, and I also don't have enough space and time to put in a video all of them. But they literally, it is very interesting to learn, and it's very important in working with animals. If you do spiritual work with animals, to try to learn from them, because they are very good spiritual fighters. They do not have the draconian implant, which is usually placed on humans. So they are in pure state. They have all astral vision. You must know this. So if you hear a dog barking and you think he barks for no reason, that's a mistake. It means there is a spirit that he sees. All dogs have astral vision. Unfortunately, the type of measures that humans take against dogs are affecting their abilities as spiritual fighters, like castration, for example. You don't castrate dogs. This is the vital force in their body. Their body functions exactly like the human body. You don't do that to them, and many others. So, for example, I don't know why God wants me to talk about this. This is my project, and as I said, I've been working 2 years with these dogs, and they're in my courtyard. They're mine. I adopted them, but I intend to make a sanctuary for more dogs that I will save, and more dogs that I will work with for a spiritual purpose, for their elevation on soul level. So let me see. God gave me specific things that He wanted me to talk about. He told me to. He actually showed me in their evolution. I monitor them. I'm 24 hours a day with them, and I watch them very closely all the time. And God has shown me once, for example, there was a certain area which was closed area normally with a gate, and by chance that gate was open. I closed it, but I don't know how somebody opened it, and basically 2 or 3 dogs entered that area. 2 of them got out of there. 1 of them stayed behind. Now the gate was not closed. The gate was it only seemed to be closed, but it wasn't closed, because I was in the house and God said, don't go out, just let them, because it was a specific type of attack in that area, and He wanted to see which one stays in it. And one of them stayed behind in that area, although he knew that the gate was open, because he didn't see me closing it. Now, I must tell you, that dog did not get out for hours. He stayed in that area because he knew that was a closed area, which normally, when I decide to close, to keep them locked, I close that area and I put them there, right? But at this point in time, it was not closed. And he knew it was not closed because he entered there, and I didn't go to close it. However, he didn't get out. He simply didn't get out for 2 hours. And I was asked, I wanted to go out and just show him, you can get out from that area. But God said, no, just stay there. And then God talked to me a little bit more about the psychological phenomenon in his mind. And he showed me, he said, because I was attacked at the time spiritually in a specific way. And God showed me, do you see him? He only stays there because that's a door which he knows can be closed, could be closed. But he knows that just a few minutes ago he entered and it wasn't closed. So he can always get out. It's just a matter of mindset. And basically then he said, this is how you exit attacks. Exactly the same way as you entered. but it's always a matter of mind power. So maybe this is a lesson for someone if he asked me to say this now, because to me, compared to the rest of the video, doesn't really make sense, but I'm imagining this is a message from God for someone. So, but it was clearly a message for me, because I was facing specific attacks and I didn't know how to stop them, and I did stop them after he explained this to me. But basically what he said, you see, the other two left because they're stronger on mind level than him. This one is staying there because he knows that that gate could be closed. But as easily, he can remember like the other two remembered, namely that nobody closed it this time. So it's opened. So he could get out. He should get out. But he stayed there for a few hours, I'm telling you. So the message was that this is how you exit attacks when you are being attacked. The same way as you entered. Exactly the same way as you entered. Yeah, so this is probably now a message for somebody, like it was a message for me then. And I did say about this. I think I said already about how God taught me to, in many different ways actually, but I gave you one example, how he asked me to teach them tough love so they will learn to stand up for themselves. Now, there are a few more. For example, I wrote prophetic writings about this. Last year in June, some neighbors here killed 2 puppies from stray dogs on the street, and they threw them over the fence in my courtyard. They poisoned them. They took them, they poisoned them, they beat them up, and they threw them over the fence in my courtyard to die in my courtyard. And then they made a huge scandal saying that my dogs killed those dogs. I was in the house at the time when this happened, and of course my dogs were not in a fight with anyone, because I would have heard if that was the case. I mean, when my dogs bark, you can hear them in the video. So you can imagine that if they would have had a fight with another dog, I could hear them as well. But even more than that, if any dog would have approached my fence, my dogs would have barked, as you can hear them more often in my videos, which was not the case. It didn't happen. So it was clear to me from the very start that somebody put them there, and they stayed overnight, because I woke up in the morning, and when I got out, I found 2 bodies in my courtyard. And there was no blood anywhere. There was no mark on their skin of being beaten or anything. My dogs don't bite. I mean, always boys especially fight among themselves, but not to the extent to kill themselves, especially that they were puppies at the time when this happened, and they were exactly the same size as the puppies which were killed. So it was not like a big difference to say that there was a big dog in my courtyard, my dog, and he killed a small puppy. It was exactly the same level and the same size and the same. So it was clear to me that my dogs didn't kill them, and that somebody threw them there. And one neighbor in particular came out while I was struggling to take the bodies from my courtyard. And he started yelling at me, making accusations, extremely aggressive, yelling that I am criminal, that my dogs are criminal, that my dogs killed those dogs, and that is not acceptable, that my dogs are criminals and should be taken away from me, and so on. This is one of the individuals who keeps sending darkness attacks at me, and he has a lot of technological devices for attacks. He actually used on my dogs, in my presence, technology for attacking dogs. I actually have pictures of it, and he positioned that technology right next to my fence, like 10 centimeters from my fence. And I had a fight with him over this. So he started yelling and hitting my fence and trying to hurt me physically, and insulting me in despicable ways. So it was even more clear to me that since, and he said, I have videos of your dogs killing, and basically he used very vivid descriptions of the scene, how they were tortured and killed, and so on. Anyhow, I called the police. The police actually was supporting him, refused to come into my courtyard, refused to take the bodies, refused to even enter to see where I found the dogs, and so on. Basically, as soon as he came, the police man went straight to this neighbor's house, although I called the police. But instead of coming to my aid, because I called 911, the police went straight to his house, to this one who was making accusations, and he came out of there telling me that I already know exactly what happened. We need to take your dogs away. And they said, but the dead bodies you're not interested to see? You're not even taking a look, a picture, something? Yeah, so he didn't. He actually didn't. I had to go myself to find a place for necropsy, because I told him, listen to me, these dogs were not killed by my dogs. These dogs were killed by poison, and I want a necropsy to be done. He refused to take the bodies, so I said, fine, I will take the bodies then, and I will get necropsy on it, and I will come. I want to know exactly where you work. I want to come to your office because I want to make a formal complaint. Are you going to make a report out of this? What is going on here? Since your agenda is to take my dogs, but you don't care about the murder. Anyhow, I did this. I went by myself. I did a necropsy, and it was proven they were poisoned. They were poisoned and thrown into my courtyard to create a setup like my dogs killed these dogs. You know, my dogs, even now, 1 year later, each of them has like 3 kilos at maximum. They're small dogs, you know. There was the same size as the other dog. Okay, so basically what God shown me was the following. I tell you this story for a reason. I wrote prophetic writing in more details at the time, but I tell you this for a reason, because in this case, God has shown me. I was in shock, so I was like, what the hell happened? Why you allowed this to happen? Why you didn't tell me? God only told me 3 days before to start painting my house, and only told me, exactly like in Chile bondage breaking, he only told me when you finish painting. And I said, what will happen then? And God only said, you will see. And indeed, I found the 2 dead bodies of the 2 puppies when I finished painting. That morning, I finished painting. All night, I painted. And in the morning, when I went out to take a breath of fresh air, I saw the bodies. Now, after that, God has shown to me that those 2 puppies were 2 souls from my lineage, which, when they were embodying in human form, when they were incarnated in human form, they were killed, poisoned by a group of secret society, satanic cult. They were poisoned, killed, basically, in order to steal their inheritance and their identity. And what they did, they poisoned them, and then they threw them, the 2 of them, into a bar where there were many individuals drunk. They created a setup like there was a fight between the 2 from my lineage and some individuals over there, which were also from my lineage. Yeah, they created this fight among them, you know, because they went to this ones and they said this one is drunk and he did this and that, he said this about you, and so on and so on. They created a fight between them. These two died because of the poison, you know, and the other two were incarcerated for murder. But the first two were from my lineage killed by poison, and the other two were from my lineage and they were thrown in jail innocent because they didn't kill them. They died because of poison. And basically, God showed me the parallel. He said, these are the dogs that you are working now with. Those which were thrown in prison are the dogs in your courtyard which you adopted. This is the bondage, why they couldn't incarnate in humans. Yeah, the two puppies which were thrown into your courtyard are also from our lineage, but they were poisoned. So I gave you this example. I only gave you so you will see. So basically, God is working through animal embodiment in order to break the same bondage, if possible, of course. It's not always possible. If, for example, a dog doesn't get adopted and is a stray dog, there's limited options for that dog to break bondage. But he uses this to break the bondage which was created on those souls when they were in human form. Now that transmutes part of the darkness, because, and God has shown to me, because you called the police, because you went and you wrote a report, and because you proved that it was poison and it was not your dogs, now the bondage of them being imprisoned, because this was what they were going to do, take my dogs in order to put them in one of these shelters of stray dogs, you know. So that's the bondage of imprisonment. So he said, you already broke the bondage for yours, you know. You just didn't succeed to break the bondage for the other two, which they poisoned. But you broke the bondage for them of being imprisoned for a murder which they didn't commit. This is a bondage which was done on some souls from our lineage. And you broke that bondage for them. Now, if you wouldn't have called the police, or if you would have accepted what that policeman said, that was a corrupt policeman, which worked with them together to create the fake criminal incarceration of the souls from our lineage, because they had help within the police force to create that at the time. So if you would have listened to him, and you wouldn't have gone by yourself to do necropsy and prove that it was poison and that it wasn't your dogs and that somebody threw them there, and all of the effort that you have made, then the bondage would have continued, right? But because you proved already, and I'm not going into details now because it's already a long video, but I must tell you that I had to fight with a few policemen because they were covering up my report. Nobody cared actually for this case to get through, you know. And I had to make numerous interventions at different levels. So I made complaint after complaint after complaint of different level, of higher level, until somebody actually cared to open an investigation, which is undergoing now. It's still undergoing. Yeah. So this is one way to break bondage through animal embodiment. There are specific bondages which you can break in this form as well. There are specific lessons which a soul can learn in this form of incarnation of animal, and you can do a lot of and further on, yeah, God is telling me to say further. And further on, what God does when he considers that that you have reached the maximum advantage with that soul that you can from a spiritual perspective. So he learned the lessons, he broke some bondage and so on. He can take that soul from an animal embodiment and give that soul to a human. if he decides, for example, I'll give you an example. There's a karmic who has done something wrong, but he did redemption. And he did redemption honestly, heartfelt, correctly, and so on. And at some point after redemption, God will decide to give him a soul, or maybe even during the redemption, in order to be able, because of course the point is to gain back their soul. So this is a process, and God actually has shown to me. I was actually very protective, and I said, "Who are you gonna give these souls to?" Because I worked very hard to raise them and to protect them and to teach them the lessons you told me to teach them. So who are you gonna give them to? Make sure that they don't lose them or something. The point is, God can take the soul from that animal embodiment after some lessons were learned, or all lessons were learned, or whatever, and he can give it to a human, which proves to be deserving of that at a specific time. Yeah. So you have to qualify for that. That's a fact. God must believe that actually you will make the most possible, so you can actually keep that soul, not lose it again and do harm or create more bondage on him, on that soul, and so on. But it's for example, it's important to know, and it's absolutely fascinating to know, and I enjoy very much the rewards of this. Now another example that God has shown me, is showing me to talk about, is for example, the result of abortions is also a similar thing, or trapped souls is similar, namely that they cannot incarnate as humans. So for example, I saved another dog from the street because they were it's a border collie, actually, and his name is Max, and he was hurt, and he was on the streets, and other dogs were surrounding him and trying to hurt him. So I took him in my courtyard. Actually, God told me that he's coming before he came, actually. And he was on the street just in front of my gate, So before he came, God told me that he will come. And I took him in. And God has shown to me that this dog is actually the soul of a son of my father, who was was actually an abortion. The woman didn't want the child, and he showed me that this happened because of certain generational curse, to be an outcast by its own family, by its own parents, and he was trapped into specific bondages, basically, not to have a family. And he showed me some of the bondages and curses, generational curses. You broke them for him because you took him in, because his generational curse, was not to be outcasted by his own family, which he was. He was thrown out on the streets. It was very obvious from the beginning that he was not used with the streets. And somebody came to this area and just probably dropped him, because this is at the outskirts of the city. So, and this happened to him. But God has shown me, because you took him in and because you made for him adoption documents, you broke that bondage for him. So whenever he learns whatever other lessons he needs to learn, he will be able to incarnate as a human. So you already helped him with this part, It's very special type of bondage breaking and spiritual work through animals. And this is one of my projects. I will build this sanctuary for dogs, which will be called Lucky Love. Is dedicated to my dog Lucky, and it will be a professionally organized. Right now, I only have my own courtyard, which is not that big, I of course have my own my Lucky, my baby Lucky. I have Max, and then there was another female dog whom I took also from the street, and for whom also I broke the bondage, broke a few bondages with her, and most of the stray dogs have are souls which have this curse or bondage on them, to be homeless, to be casted out by their family, to be betrayed by their everyone in their family, and basically this is why they become stray. But if you adopt them, you already break a bondage for them. If you make documents for them and they have a clear identity, you already break another bondage for them. So there are many ways in which you can do spiritual work through animals and bondage breaking through animals. And of course, this helps you too, as well as a person who are doing this. But this is very important, especially for those who have pets. You must understand that those animals did not come to you by chance. These animals are dogs from your ancestral line who came to help you. And unfortunately, the very wrong narrative out there about pets is that, you need to train them, you need to teach them to be obedient, to do this, to do that. That's very wrong. That is very wrong. And you're robbing them. What you're doing to them, it's exactly what was done to you. You're mind programming them. And this is not beneficial to them or to you, or even for the meeting of the two of you, because the two of you are meeting in order to carry on a specific type of bondage breaking, and you're robbing him of those animals of their own reflexes, which should be teaching you and bringing you closer to 5D. They're very, very good spiritual fighters. They have astral vision, as opposed to most humans who don't, at this phase of ascensions, they don't have astral vision. So just by that you will understand. For example, I have this female dog. I had her before I left in the spiritual journey. She died in my car while I was driving out of the country, crossing the border. There were many death attacks on my car, on myself and my dogs. Me and Lucky, we survived. She died. And when I returned from the spiritual journey, I claimed her constantly, of course, because I wanted her back, and I was deeply hurt when she died. And God has shown me that I can claim her and that He will give her back to me. And indeed, the very day when I arrived back home from the spiritual journey, this female dog came, and it's exactly the same dog, but it's exactly the same reactions. Even when she met Lucky, it was obvious that they recognized each other. They didn't necessarily like each other in the previous phase. And I was surprised. All the gestures are her gestures, so you can see it's the same dog, the same soul. But the only thing that surprised me was that this time around, after I took her in and she settled in, she started barking at the fence and the gate every time when somebody approaches, and even sometimes when humans are not approaching. And I asked God, I said, what's wrong with her? Why is she barking like this? Because she didn't used to. She was very fancy and very selfish and very spoiled before we left on spiritual journey, in the previous incarnation. And God told me, she died because when you got into the car, she went to sleep. And there were huge attacks in the car. Both Lucky and me, we were so sick. I was driving. Lucky didn't want to stay put because he was feeling sick. I was feeling sick. So it was really huge darkness being sent open my car. And I actually didn't think I would make it. I didn't believe that I will make it alive to cross the border, but I figured I have no other options since in my own house there was the same attacks when I left. So, and she died because she was in her sleep, so she couldn't put a fight with spirits that were sent, and there were sacrifice rituals done, and specific demonic forces and spirits being sent at my car and at myself, and God said, now this time around, she learned the lesson. So she's not laying around and sleeping all day long, but she's protecting the territory against spirits which are being sent to your property and to your house. She's putting up a spiritual fight. This is one lesson she learned, that she was separated from you by death because she didn't put up a fight against spirits and darkness being sent. And this is true, she wasn't. In the previous incarnation, she was never barking. She was always just enjoying herself, very spoiled. She was very spoiled and fancy like this, even with me. Now she's very protective and she fights a lot to defend the territory. So God has shown to me, this is the progress, and God has shown to me, you suffered a lot and you cried a lot when she died, but you see, you already helped her. Although you got separated, I promised you I will give her back to you, and I did. I gave her back to you, and you see, she learned the lesson. And in the following incarnation, she asked to come to you. While you were claiming her, she also claimed you from the divine realm. And she was determined this time to put a fight, not to stay around, So she learned the lesson. Okay, I'm going to stop here because this is the longest video I made, I think, ever. But the point is, God asked me to give a few examples. So I did. I gave a few, not all he told me to say, but now it's way too much. The spiritual fighting through animal embodiment is really, really special. They really have exactly, their souls, which are humans, and they carry on. I mean, for example, this female dog gave birth in my courtyard like a month after I got her. And I was surprised I didn't know what to do with the puppies, and God has shown to me she needed to give birth to heal because of the traumas of previous incarnation. Because you broke certain bondages for her, but she also needs to do the healing on DNA level. She didn't succeed to do that because she was killed, right? So that's one thing. And another thing, you must keep the puppies because these are souls from our lineage, which I sent to you in order so you can help them to evolve spiritually, to learn their lessons, so we would have more of our lineage incarnated in 3D and carry on the spiritual fighting. Yeah. So it's very special, and it has a very subtle way of wisdom, the work with the spiritual work with animal embodiment. I recommend that whoever is interested in doing it should request permission from divine realm. It's huge responsibility. It's very difficult to make sometimes because it's difficult to follow the divine logic in what you're supposed to be doing. Again, you're not supposed to be pampering and they're not supposed to be blocked from their reflexes and so on. But it is extremely rewarding to see that you helped a soul or many souls to evolve, to break the bondages, so they will have a better chance in the next incarnation, whatever that will be, as animals or as humans. I promise that I will post pictures from my sanctuary as soon as I get to my new location and I start creating that. And I do hope that all those of you who have pets will take this information and think more carefully about how you take advantage of the presence of your pet and how you empower that pet to break his own bondage. Yeah. If you have any questions about this, because it is quite new topic in terms of spiritual fighting, please let me know. You can write it in the comments. I will be happy to answer. I will be happy to make more videos about this. When I will build the sanctuary, I promise to film also, so you will see it with your own eyes as well. I hope that this will help you maybe think in different terms about the pets you have and to work with them on spiritual level.